All right, another week, and we're rocking and rolling. Something that caught my eye that we'll talk about a bit was, let me load this up here, HederaTransactions.com. Weird, sometimes the site shows 0 TPS, and then, now it just bumped up to 1,764 TPS. So it's really crazy. It's really crazy to learn more and more about how the network functions and also how enterprises are utilizing the network. And not even just in the sense of what are their use cases or what are they doing, but getting all these different interesting insights into how their backends actually work. Last week, we got a really, really interesting insight into Avery Dennison and Atma.io that I didn't know about that makes so much sense that I just wanted to kick off the show with because I found it so interesting. People unfamiliar, Atma.io from Avery Dennison. Avery Dennison is a Hedera Governing Council member. They have a use case that's focused on carbon offset tracking through the supply chain and product journeys and all that good stuff. But what was really interesting is, although it's like a super high, throughput use case, and is an enterprise use case, it was really weird to see how the transactions put through the network from Avery Dennison were always so consistent. There was never a huge spike or lull. It was kind of like smooth. And I definitely found it weird because, the first thing I think is kind of like, well, why is that the case? Shouldn't, when you think of a supply chain, it can't be running at, this exact amount of TPS per second consistently. There's got to be some variation. So I didn't really understand what that was about. But with the exploit that happened last week and the questions surrounding, was Atma.io still utilizing the mainnet while the mainnet proxies were shut off? What was the deal with that? And what I think further added confusion for me and other community members was when it was first communicated that when the mainnet proxies were restored and access was brought back to the mainnet, we were like, oh, okay, so it turns out that Atma.io and Avery Dennison have a system that allows them to process all these transactions, and when the mainnet is accessible, send those to the mainnet, so effectively they're reconciled. And so at that point, we were like, oh, wow, we're probably going to see thousands or tens of thousands of transactions per second on the mainnet as all of these backlogged, tens of millions of transactions are sent to the mainnet. But when the mainnet came back online and when the Atma.io use case was effectively reconnected, things just kind of started humming along. And it turns out that Atma.io leverages its, Avery Dennison has built in their own kind of throttling mechanism within their stack that sends a steady amount of transactions to the mainnet. So that was really interesting to me. And that was a big learning moment when I look at enterprise use cases. They aren't necessarily going to be sending transactions to the mainnet right as they happen. They could be sending them in that kind of manner because that's one of the strengths of the Hedera network is you have that fair ordering, you have that ability to reconcile. And if the network is, experiences some kind of air-gapped outage like we did, where the mainnet wasn't necessarily turned off or stopped working, it was just that gap was created. It's very interesting to me. It's like, okay, so use cases, they don't skip a beat. And a lot of these enterprises are going to have these kind of mechanisms built in. So that was a huge insight for me coming out of last week. And I get, this is a story we want to talk about, but I guess I'll knock it off right before we even get into the show. The mainnet, has been increasing in activity recently, and I'll just pull up the Metrica dashboard here, and I'll go to the past week. or actually I'll go to the past month. We've seen TPS rise into kind of the 700 to 800 area, which is really, really, really interesting for a few reasons. The first reason is, of course, when we saw that initial quote unquote step function, we saw between that, 500, maybe 600 TPS. And now we're seeing this really substantial, consistent increase by about 100 TPS. And for me, we haven't really seen any new significant Hedera consensus topics. It's still consistently been the Atma.io use case, but is this a situation where Avery Dennison and Atma.io just kind of turned up a knob a little bit when instead of sending X amount of transactions to the network, we're going to send Y. And they just make an adjustment and increase that throughput on their end to the mainnet. It's really got me rethinking about what we see on the mainnet versus what could be happening with these use cases. I've always been the thought of, major use case comes online, boom, instant activity on the mainnet. There's more tech stack in between. There's more technology on the end of the use case. There's so many different things that can plug into and utilize the Hedera network. So that was just a key insight. I really only think we could have learned something like that during a situation similar to that precompile attack on the mainnet. When you have situations like that, you can sometimes really get a closer look at things, get a look inside. So that was the silver lining to that. That was something cool that I learned that we talked about last week, but has just been kind of rattling around in my brain, and I just couldn't wait to bring it back up on the show and kind of kick it off with that. So for me, as I watch the mainnet, as I kind of see what's going on, as I watch the progression, I'm now kind of going to keep in mind that there's a bit more of a buffer on maybe some of these use cases that are leveraging the mainnet. It's not right down to the wood per se. So we got a lot more to look at. I'm going to give a rip through the news before we kick things off, and I'm hoping Rob Allen's going to stop by from the HBAR Foundation to talk about the Guardian and ESG. We're going to learn about some of that stuff. He's been saying some interesting things recently. But what's some stuff going on? By the way, Twitter's doing this thing where with threads, it's only showing me like chunks of the thread at a time. I don't know what that is about. I don't know if anyone is having a similar experience, but we'll get through it as best we can here, folks. So we're going to talk about an update. Hedera's provided an official update since we last covered the exploit that we'll just quickly touch on. We've got some other insights in regards to the payment from Hedera to Swirlds Labs. It's really been on everybody's mind. We've got some CBDC updates. We've got some updates from Calaxy, right? A premier use case that we haven't heard a lot about recently, but now they're starting to make some moves. We got updates from Pangolin. We've got Hello Future Buzz did a really great spaces with Carmel Cadet that we'll talk about. That's, at EMTech, CEO of EMTech, working on some CBDC stuff. Lehman gave a talk. There was a clip that he gave, and I just wanted to touch on it this week as well. Music NFTs are making moves. There is a music scene forming on Hedera. There was a tweet that I shared in the news space that was deleted. Interesting. That's happened before when I go to share a news piece in the spaces and what does it mean? What does that mean? I don't know. We're going to talk about AI a little bit too. John Wingate from Bank Social has a perspective on that I think is really important to highlight. We got an update from Lehman Swap. We got an update from Headstarter. What else we got going on? Updates from the HBAR Foundation. Updates regarding the Coupon Bureau. We'll talk a little bit about HederaCon and all that good stuff. I mean, it's a good spaces. There's a lot to talk about, and we'll get a chance to have a quick chat with Rob. So we're live on Twitter Spaces with another week in Hashgraph to unpack. If you need to catch up on previous week's news, head over to itsbrandond.com/HBAR where you'll find past episodes. And I mean, this week, title of the show, How Soon Is Now, not only is a great song by the Smiths, but it's also kind of what I just thought about off the top of my head when I was kind of planning for this episode. Again, coming off the back of last week with all the craziness happening in the banking system and the exploit on Hedera and the hacks of the wallets on other networks and all, it was truly like a crazy period. Now we're a week later, things are a little fresh, and we've got some really bold statements going around, right? We've got some really interesting announcements popping up here and there. And for me, I think of the Coupon Bureau, I think of the ESG space, I think of, Atma.io, and I think of all these pending new governing council members, all of these insights that we have yet to hear from the Davos conference, and Hedera also was just at ETH Denver, and all these different types of things. It does feel like so much is bubbling to the surface. And we hear soon a lot, right? We're hearing this is soon, this is soon, this is soon. But also, like, things are happening now. Like, I always kind of just remind myself that, it's only been, 2 months since we had this quote unquote step function. We went from low double digit TPS to hundreds of TPS, after waiting years and years and years. So that's huge, and that's happening now. And I kind of ask myself, how soon is now? What could be right around the corner? The sense that I'm getting from a lot of folks, again, at Swirlds Labs, at Hedera, at the HBAR Foundation, and even kind of the tone from Hedera's social media and the messaging. And it does feel to a certain extent like these different organizations are hitting a new stride and truly entering in a different phase of scale and of the network. And at the same time that so many crazy things have happened, again, we got a rockin' DeFi ecosystem now. We've got a crazy NFT ecosystem that continues to grow and grow and grow. All these different types of things. There's even bigger things that we're waiting on. So that's kind of what's on my mind. And I mean, I think it's on a lot of other people's minds too. And with that, good evening from Ottawa, Canada, everyone. My name is Brandon Davenport, and I'm a developer, artist, and creative agency owner at Dirksen and Davenport Incorporated. And like all of you, I am a Hashgraph enthusiast. It is Sunday, March 19th, and there's a lot to talk about. Welcome to Hashgraph News and Rumors, episode 69, How Soon Is Now? This is a weekly show that covers the top stories related to Hedera, HBAR, and everything in between. Broadcast live on Twitter Spaces every Sunday, 7 p.m. Eastern, 4 p.m. Pacific, and made available on all major podcast platforms, including Spotify and Apple Podcasts, every Monday. Get all the info you need about the show and listen to past episodes at itsbrandond.com/hbar. If you're listening live, check out the Twitter thread pinned to the top of the Spaces. Take a deeper dive into each story. Also, everybody listening, take a moment now, share the Spaces. Let your friends know you're listening. The more the merrier. It's easy to do. There's a button on the top right. You can also click the little comment button at the bottom right of the Spaces to ask a question or share something interesting that listeners might like to know, and I'll talk about it. Also, this is a reminder, join the Hashgraph Enthusiast Twitter community. It's an awesome way for Hashgraph newbies and early adopters to connect, team up, share knowledge and insights. The link to join is in the thread as well. And also, this show continues to grow from hundreds of listeners to thousands, and that's because of people like you that take the time out of their day to listen. The show is by far one of my favorite things to do. If you're interested in becoming a supporter of the show, please consider making an HBAR donation. It helps me continually add value to the Hashgraph community and helps keep the show ad-free. You can send a donation to enthusiast.hbar using your Hedera wallet, brought to you by listeners like you. Now, let's look at HBAR. Let's look at some price stuff just real quick. I mean, obviously, we've got a lot happening in the broader finance ecosystem, obviously with major banks, and there was just another major bank that acquired another major bank, and there's all sorts of fear and breaking news every second. That crypto whale watcher Twitter account with the Justin, I'm seeing so many of those pop in. Feels like you can't really keep up with everything. On top of that, we've got all the AI craziness that happened. Truly, like, the last week was just insane with the news. It was really, 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 really crazy. But when we look at HBAR, it's not too crazy. I mean, we're continuing to channel between that 6 cent and 7 cent range, right? We might see a little bit of a ride up to retest that 7 cent resistance. And we do have that kind of floor where we did dip down to 5.5 cents on the 9th of March. So, we are seeing some, higher lows and higher highs, hopefully. But at the end of the day, the price action of HBAR is really at the whim of what's happening in the broader financial market, what's going on with Bitcoin, all those different types of things. In general, we're going to follow Bitcoin. But what's interesting is Bitcoin has seen a really strong ride up from that kind of sub $20,000 range on the 9th, all the way to 28,000 today. So a lot of other altcoins, have not seen that same price action. Ethereum a little bit, but HBAR definitely has not seen a major move up. So what that tells us is, with all sorts of different crazy things happening in the broader finance market, and also two similarities happening between, the 2008 financial crisis and certain elements of what are happening now. Obviously, on the backdrop of that is crypto, right? Bitcoin came to be because of the 2008 financial crisis. And at this point, this again brings Bitcoin much deeper into the public conversation with so many other people. So that's been really, really interesting to see. But we're going to just have to keep an eye on that. And, when we think about what we could see, with HBAR, you really don't know exactly what's going to happen. But what I will say is, watch the Bitcoin charts right now. That's what we should be doing. Most of the market, that will be a little bit of an indicator of what we'll see happen. Again, we have talked in the past about HBAR making moves on its own. We have seen it make moves on its own. It's really not that time yet. It would really take something incredibly substantial to have that happen. So again, my prediction is as good as anyone's prediction. That's why I'm not going to give one. But also too, if we take a look at some of the stuff happening on Saucer Swap, we'll just take a quick peek at some of these HTS assets. Obviously, these are cryptos that are minted right to the layer 1 of Hedera. So we've got Sauce just chilling. And again, these are the 24-hour price changes. Now, again, another shout out to Saucer Swap. Great update to the UI on the website. It would be awesome to have those 7-day price changes on the analytics page. That'd be great. But we'll go over the 24-hour ones real quick before I go to Rob. And we've got Rob Allen tuning in from the HBAR Foundation. Rob, feel free to hop up. I did shoot you an invite. Just click that speak button and I'll bring you up and we can chat about ESG and the Guardian. But we got Sauce. It's just chilling. We've got Headstarter up just 4%. What else we got going on? We got Grelf. Grelf is this kind of meme coin that's been around in the space, seen some crazy price action. We got $80,000 worth of volume in the past 24 hours. Just, watch it. It's a blast. Seeing some of these meme coins pop into the ecosystem is fun. We got Dovu up just about 5%. We've got Calaxy up 6%. We've got Stater's token up almost 4%. And Jam down about 0.5%. So that's a little bit about what's going on. But next, what I want to do is I want to talk about really a core element of what makes up Hedera, what makes it special, and that's ESG, and that's also what the Guardian is, and we're going to unpack that. We've got Rob Allen up here, but first I just wanted to kind of give a bit of a rundown. So Rob Allen calls himself a payments guy. Starting off as an engineer in the British Army building battlefield computing systems, Rob went on to develop global payment solutions at many organizations and banks across the UK, Australia, Denmark, Sweden, and Switzerland. In 2018, he published a book called FinTech Revolution, where he mentioned a new technology called Hashgraph. And Rob, I know that book is a little outdated now, but worth a read. Most folks listening would remember him as the co-founder of Connect ID at FPOS, where he would eventually take on the role of Hedera Governing Council member and then move on to become Senior Vice President of Ecosystem Acceleration at the HBAR Foundation. He's also a founder and CEO of Nodal.io. So it's Sunday for me here in Ottawa, but for you in Sydney, it's Monday morning. Great to have you on the show, Rob. How's the week treating you so far?
Hey, Brandon, and hello from the future.
I love that. I mean, it was so hard for me not to make that joke.
I just made that up, but it's quite cool, isn't it?
Yeah, I know it is cool. I was gonna say something like that in the DMs, but I was like, oh, that's so lame. But it is true. You're literally in the future.
Yeah, it really is.
That's awesome. So, really great to have you on the show. I mean, we've talked about so many different things. We've talked about like the new coupon standards, but also we've talked about like the new Toll Earth stuff and Dovo and all these different types of things in the Guardian. For me, it's definitely like a little bit out of my knowledge scope. So I'm so happy to have you on the show and kind of break down some of these things. So I'm really excited.
Yeah, so am I. And it seems, and thank you for the kind of my background. Yeah. It seems very disparate, the journey I've been on, but it goes over 40 odd years. So, that's not surprising. But actually looking back, there is a kind of golden thread through all of it, or maybe two golden threads. The first one is this need for decentralized, resilient architectures and infrastructures on which to build systems where you can send either value or information in a trusted way. Back in the day when I was building battlefield computer systems, which for the British Army, clearly you need that resilience and decentralization because any of those nodes can be taken out at any time, and that's what we were building back then. Obviously pre-blockchain, but if blockchains had been around, we would have been, and I suspect many military engineers these days are looking at these sorts of systems to do just the same thing. But information back then was when I moved into banking and banking systems and payment systems, much the same thing. And so, I was looking very closely at how we could build future systems that enabled that transfer of value. Value is whatever you attribute value to, of course. And then once I got the blockchain kind of bug back in 2015, when I was working at Nordea Bank and representing them on the Ripple consortium, and then wrote the book when I came to Australia. A lot of my values started creeping in. I've kind of moved away from banks primarily because of a misalignment of values, and the book was about deconstructing banking and reconstructing it in a way that you could bank the bottom billion, the unbanked, those who are underserved by banks. And my co-author actually went on to build a business on those principles. And yes, you're right, it's a bit dated, but half of the book is actually a blueprint of how to do this. And I think that's all still really valid. My co-author, Sophie, and I had collectively about 40 years of building banking systems. So we kind of knew a little bit about that we were bringing to apply. And her business now actually is very active in Africa, doing exactly what we were talking about in the book. I've always been conservation minded. I'm called Sharky because I'm a shark photographer, and I've been director of the Shark Conservation Society for many years. So all of these things really combined. And when I left PwC and set up Nodal that you referenced, that's all about ESG. It's all about the Sustainable Development Goals and how technology can be applied to solve those problems. Fast forward, when the HBAR Foundation was set up and I joined, my original thought was actually to set up a foundation, a special purpose foundation specifically for these things, Hedera-based foundation that would target sustainability specifically. And then Wes Geisenberger and I, were delighted to be able to do it under the auspices of the main HBAR Foundation. But Wes is the architect of all this. He's the brilliant mind at the center of this web of incredible Guardian-based partners that are really doing some amazing things to move the needle. And I'm largely in a supporting role, but very, very interested in terms of moving things out of the way to allow Wes and the partners to proceed at pace and at scale, which is absolutely necessary to address the issues around climate change and sustainability more generally.
That's awesome. I love that. And you brought up something interesting too that I think marks an interesting time in your career. You referenced PwC, and I know in 2017, while working at PwC, you happened to be in the U.S. and through serendipity, you ended up having a 3-hour conversation with Dr. Lehman Baird after meeting for the first time. How did that meeting impact your thinking regarding the future of DLT?
Oh, it was everything. It was the epiphany moment. I've been, like I said, I've been working in the blockchain space prior to that as a payments guy. So I was looking for the right technology to create this kind of vision of the future. Of course, we had private permissioned blockchains, which were all the rage in 2015, and 2016 maybe. But they were always a bit, uninspiring to me. Most private permission blockchains have, you could accomplish with a distributed database, and you don't really need all of the paraphernalia around it to build trust, because you've got a big perimeter fence of a consortium legal agreement to fall back on. So it didn't really do it for me. So I needed a public ledger, but I also needed a public ledger that would scale, because the future that we lean into is, it's going to have IoT devices by the billion. The transactional throughput has got to be, got to support, IoT devices, Industry 4.0 type mechanisms, where incentivization models need to transact in tiny amounts of value. And so I was struggling with blockchain doing that and it wasn't really a surprise that we gravitated towards Hedera, because we were introduced to the Hedera project in 2017. So this is a year before the launch, and 2 years actually before the open access event. And I was in the US. We were actually at PwC. We built a platform called Vulcan, which was a blockchain-based payment solution that we were trying to spin out as a separate business. And we were just doing the rounds trying to raise funds, and it was proving very difficult because we were built on. Actually, we started by building it on a fork of Bitcoin, as you do. And then I looked at Ethereum and discounted it pretty quickly. And then multi-chain and Stellar were all kind of candidates, but none of them really fit the bill. And so when we were introduced to Mance and Lehman via mutual contacts, And I had this conversation with Lehman about what we were trying to do with the Vulcan project and what he was trying to do. It became very clear to me that the API layer, the API driven approach, we didn't even have the Hedera consensus service back then. That was just it was the cryptocurrency service, the file storage service, and the initial smart contract service, which no one ever really used. That was the offering. But when I was talking to Lehman, it became very obvious to me that consensus as a service or blockchain as a service was the primary offering, and that we could actually do some really amazing things. It was too early for us though, and actually the Vulcan project ended up being re-assimilated into the PwC organization. They now use it as an inter-office treasury platform, but it's a stablecoin platform. It's effectively tokenizes fiat and then uses kind of FX to transfer money between PwC US or PwC Australia or PwC Singapore or wherever. So that was a good experience, but I left anyway after not being able to spin that out, and had always kept in touch with the Hedera project through the community. I was at one center. I was kind of lurking around in those days, learning as much as I could, and then built a couple of startups myself using the technology when it was available. And then ultimately, as you said earlier, gravitated towards FPOS with my payments experience. It was actually my COVID gig. So the project work was drying up. I'd done some really amazing stuff in the SDG side of things with renewable energy and waste management and circular economies. But I needed a proper job. And so I joined as entrepreneur in residence at FPOS, which then reignited my love of Hedera, and I kind of brought that into the fold. We ran a couple of good proofs of concepts around micropayments, which is clearly my core origin story around Hedera, and the rest is history. We were able to take FPOS, which is now called Australian Payments Plus, onto the governing council, and I went from journeyman fanboy to governing council member over the course of a few years.
That's incredible. I mean, what a journey. And it's so funny because there's so many people in positions such as yourself that genuinely did just start out like as a community member. Like you did meet Lehman, and you did talk about some of these bigger enterprise use cases and how to implement those. But genuinely, like, as you said, you were one center and you were part of the community. And I think that is something special about the ecosystem and kind of the organizations that have spun off from Hedera is so many of these folks, like we can look to Brandon the HBAR Bull or Zepsi or any of these folks, and I just go, these are community members at heart, and you're one of those folks.
Absolutely. And Web3 is nothing if not about community. It's about community and it's about collaboration. Even though we're enterprise grade, all the enterprises I speak to all the time are on that transition between Web 2 and Web 3. It's about how going back to what I've said about my book, how do you deconstruct the edifice that is the Web 2 corporate and integrate it into a more decentralized, more community-based, more collaborative, more citizen-focused future. And that's the journey that, those that are on it will, they may succeed. They may only get to Web 2.5, and that might be enough. Or they may make it all the way. But if they don't go anywhere, I suspect that most of them will fail.
I have to agree. Now, there are so many different verticals where L1s and other networks are trying to capture market share, but Hedera is betting big on these ESG initiatives and use cases. What's the goal? Is refi the tip of the spear for mass adoption of Hedera?
It's one of the goals. Regenerative finance is critical in the ESG space in order to drive the scale in the projects that are bringing these credits, carbon credits, biodiversity credits, water, whichever, or correlated credits into the market. So we've got, the quote that everyone picked up on from me last week about trillions of dollars. There are trillions of dollars of investment necessary to move the needle towards a net zero future. And most of the mechanisms for doing that are by creating project-based credits, which then get taken to marketplaces, and you need to find the right price for those credits in an open and transparent market, such that the buyers can trust what they're buying in order to offset their own operation. Now, offsetting is not the only mechanism. Corporates, enterprises, individuals should try and reduce their impact. They should try and avoid it in the first place, and then finally offset whatever's residual. So that's the kind of the landscape in which we have to scale to address the problems at hand. But you can't do that with old market infrastructure. The carbon credit markets were developed by 20 years ago or more by bankers primarily, with a model that was already probably broken and certainly not fit for purpose. So what we are trying to do is to recreate market infrastructure, which is far more both Web3 focused, but also uses the benefits of transparency and trust inherent in public ledgers at scale, in order that these trillions of dollars of investment can actually come in and not hit friction and bottlenecks and broken marketplaces, and therefore not succeed. So the mission of the Sustainable Impact Fund is, you've probably heard Wes say it many times, is to bring the balance sheet of the planet to a public ledger. What that means is the balance sheet of the planet is all the natural assets in the natural world, not just carbon, but nature-based assets that the planet has and are being largely exploited. And a public ledger is necessary because private ledgers don't create the trust required to get to an equitable asset price, such that financing can go back into the projects in order to scale. And we've got 5 main goals to do this. The first is how do we make climate finance auditable? How do we develop a system of auditing and verifying climate finance transactions to ensure accuracy and transparency? So the auditability is really key here. We're doing this through digitizing and open sourcing methodologies. The methodologies are the rule book that projects, renewable energy, mangrove renewals, peatland regeneration, habitat renewal, and species protection. The methodologies are the rule book. Now we're creating a way to digitize that, and open sourcing it, so projects across the world can kind of go to a library, take a methodology which we call a policy, and just tweak it for their own purposes. It lowers the bar to entry into these marketplaces so that projects can actually shape themselves to deliver credits into the market. The next step is and the third one is, how do we scale validation and verification? The current model requires third parties called VBBs, or validation and verification bodies, to ensure that what's being promised to be delivered into the marketplace is signed off on, and which is an oversimplistic way of stating it, but you get the picture. The VBBs are, there's a handful of these businesses around the world. They tend to fly into location, with boots on the ground and clipboards in hand, in order to verify the projects. that is not a scalable model. So if you're pumping trillions of dollars into, thousands or tens of thousands of new projects, you're not going to be able to scale. So that's one of the bottlenecks that you hit that I mentioned. So we are doing that through use of digital measurement, reporting, and verification techniques, which tie back to the which is called DMRV. That ties back to the open source policies and methodologies that were in the previous goal. The last two goals are on the marketplace and the buy side of the equation. So this is all about supply of verifiable, auditable, discoverable assets into a marketplace. In order for a marketplace to be equitable, to be transparent, to be free and open, you need a number of things. But firstly, you need trust in the marketplace. You need that level of transparency that only a public ledger will provide. But you also need a global carbon price, and pricing mechanisms that are equitable. There is no global carbon price. Different brokers with different middlemen gouge, all the value from the assets in the current markets, and very little of it gets back to the projects. With a free and open and transparent marketplace, you've got far more chance of achieving this kind of global carbon price. And in carbon markets, we're looking at $50, $60, $70 as a carbon price in order to, the higher the better, actually, because that then feeds back into that kind of financing loop into projects. But of course, with a lack of trust, opaqueness, middlemen, buyers will probably go for the lowest common denominator. All they're doing is, at the moment, is a tick box exercise to show that they're meeting their ESG policies, and the auditors will be happy. As soon as we've blown this all open and we've provided the transparency such that independent verification or independent audit of a corporate's meeting of its obligations are possible, every one of us could potentially then go and check that Microsoft or a bank or a government even are doing the right thing. Then you can get to the point where the pricing mechanisms actually start moving up, and where you actually then get to a place where speculation becomes possible in these marketplaces. To my point about Tolam Earth on the HBAR bull this weekend. And then the fifth goal is kind of related, but it's how do we make ESG reporting credible? So ESG is an obligation on a business, environmental, social, and governance aspects of their non-financial risk. Non-financial risk still has to be accounted for on a business's books. And like I said, at the moment, it's very, very difficult for that obligation to be demonstrated to an auditor. With all of this in place, that becomes possible, and so it means that corporates actually, those who are in the voluntary sectors, can actually do right by their stakeholders, their shareholders, their customers, and there will be an increasing demand for them to actually do the right thing. And those in compliance markets actually absolutely have to do the right thing. So those 5 goals: making climate finance auditable, digitizing and open sourcing methodologies, scaling validation verification, getting to a global carbon price, and making ESG reporting credible, are the kind of the cardinal points of what WES and the Sustainable Impact Fund are seeking to achieve. And we're doing this through partnerships, through investment in technology that we're open sourcing, the Guardian stack, the automated regression market maker stack on which Tolam is built, our partnerships with financing partners like Evercity or Solid World DAO, Flow Carbon, and the hundreds and hundreds of projects that are coming into this space now to tokenize their credits through Guardian, because they recognize the benefits of doing that. So it's a long-winded answer, but it was kind of the when we talk about Guardian, a lot of people just think it's like a tokenization engine and don't realize it is part of a very sophisticated patchwork of partnerships and open source technology and kind of investments and grants to make this whole thing move forward at pace and at scale.
No, that's great. I mean, I definitely appreciate the long-winded answer, just because these are the types of things that are needed in the community for us to kind of go a little deeper and wrap our heads around exactly what this means. Because you're right, it is really big. Like, this is a multi-trillion dollar industry forming, and the world will fundamentally change, and how businesses operate will change because of it. And having that kind of nuance and understanding these things more and more is so important, especially because it's such a huge component of the focus of this network. But you brought up Microsoft and also your recent interview with the HBAR Bull over the weekend, which was a great video, by the way. When you talked about Microsoft, you're referencing the fact that there are literally not enough verifiable carbon credits on the planet to meet the needs of just their requirements, even just a single major corporation. And it makes me think, like, at a high level, do you see Hashgraph technology as the catalyst for this new multi-trillion dollar industry? Like, would we be seeing this industry be formed without Hedera on this time frame?
So that quote was from Marley Gray. Marley Gray was one of the chief architects at Microsoft, and a key mover in the Interwork Alliance, which set the standards on which Guardian has been built. So the token taxonomy framework was formed by a working group of 50 or more businesses, including Hedera. Pre-decentralized Hedera, Wes was still working on this, a couple of years ago, and the IWA had Accenture as well as Microsoft and many others. It's part of the Global Blockchain Business Council now, the GBBC. So they're continuing to work on these standards. But Microsoft wanted the first instance of the token taxonomy framework to be about sustainability. I mean, there will be many other instances or instantiations of that framework, but sustainability was really key. And because of this recognition that Microsoft has a massive operation and a massive obligation to offset that operation, but being a climate-minded and trying to do the right thing, both as a fiduciary for the business, as well as wanting to do the right thing by the planet, they needed to find verifiable credits. They needed to kind of cut through this veil of opaqueness in carbon markets, and they couldn't. So this was one of those kind of catalysts at the beginning of this journey that Wes and Hedera kind of plugged into, in order that building the standards was the first step in order to build what became called the Guardian. And to answer your question directly, I do not know of any other layer one chain, and we'll discount the layer twos because I think they make too many trade-offs and are kind of compromising because of the shortcomings of their own layer one. So, put that to one side. So having a layer one network which operates at the scale that is necessary to notarize all of this data. So the way Guardian works is it takes data from projects, it notarizes the data points that are collected by the project using the Hedera consensus service. It signs all those bits of data with verifiable credentials that are digital identity primitives, also on Hedera. And then it tokenizes all of that data, all that metadata, and creates effectively an NFT out of the back of the Guardian. So this NFT, or it's actually a hybrid token, but it carries the metadata in a way that is discoverable. There is no other chain that can do that at the scale that we need like I said, without the friction or the bottlenecks. So although there are lots of projects around the world that are well-meaning and value-driven, and there are chains that are very specific to solving climate issues, Hedera is for me, like it's for me the only one that I would build micropayment solutions on. It's the only one I would build sustainability solutions on. And in fact, when we're talking to projects or project developers or partners in the ecosystem who have come across some Ethereum and other chains to build on Hedera, or the corporates, the first thing we talk about is the UCL report. The two UCL reports actually now that demonstrably show that the Hedera network is carbon neutral, actually carbon negative because we offset as well, as a platform. And it really resonates when we have these conversations. When we were at COP27 in Egypt, when we were talking to the UN, and when the team went to Davos and we're talking via the World Economic Forum with everyone who was really kind of drawn to the sustainability specifics of the Hedera network, this is where we start, right? The platform on which you build climate solutions on cannot carry a ton of carbon debt before you even start offsetting. It simply cannot. And so no other chain can make that claim. I mean, some are trying because they're offsetting, but the algorithm that is the Hashgraph algorithm is so lightweight. It is so specifically addressing the problems of sustainability. I think Lehman Baird, probably wasn't thinking that back in 2014 when he was first coming up with ways of designing platforms for shared worlds, but his computer science principles for developing a really efficient, really scalable algorithm that became Hashgraph and in use by the Hedera network is perfect for sustainability solutions, as we have seen. And in the conversations that we've had through the foundation, through Hedera itself, the governing council, this is what resonates. This is the real issue of now, and we are ready and primed for that. So when I said on Brandon's show at the weekend that I think why not all of that value coming to Hedera? Why not all those trillions of dollars of investment being tokenized on through the Guardian ecosystem? I truly mean it. I think that we will attract increasingly more and more, and as we scale and demonstrate that we can scale without hitting all these bottlenecks and scaling ceilings, that it will draw more and more in. It'll take a while, of course. It'll take maybe 10 years, 20 years, but why not? Once you get into a virtuous cycle that demonstrates in a way that is verifiable that this funding is being used for the right purposes and actually providing positive, beneficial outcomes, then more will come in, because there's a lot to do, and there's a lot of money and investment sat on the sidelines waiting for the right approach. And everything that we have heard back through COP27, we'll go to COP28 again this year to demonstrate, the progress, and at Davos, and in between all of the meetings that we have all of the time, it's that what we're hearing back is that there is no other solution like this, and just take my money, basically.
I love to hear that. And I mean, it does sound like that. And I mean, you and other folks have referenced, this industry, that it's going to be multi-trillion dollars, all those different types of things. And it's clear that Hedera and Hashgraph are going to really be an accelerator of that industry. And it makes me curious going within those predictions that are being made, are they factoring in the impacts that technologies like Hedera Hashgraph are going to have on that industry? And when those are seen, could that have an impact on those predictions of the size of these industries? Because I imagine these predictions for these industries are being made with the thinking that the existing tools and technologies available will be what supports that. That's something I'm trying to wrap my mind around.
Yeah, it's a very good point, and I don't have an answer for that. I think it will be something that accelerates over time. You're quite right that you know
We'll just have to see.
We'll have to say, still to this day, everyone, I would love everyone on the planet to know about Hedera, but they don't. We're working on that. But it will gather pace. And this is why it's been so important through the last 18 months to put in place the infrastructure that removes all that friction and the bottlenecks in order to scale. Because once it does start scaling, once that money does start flowing, once these projects do, go from dozens to hundreds to thousands, we need to be able to not have to, reverse engineer and change the technologies that have been put in place. So, the fact that we can trust Hedera to scale, and that we've created this amazing open source community around Guardian that sits, every week with dozens, if not 100 people kind of contributing into the open source code stack. And we've worked with some very, very smart people across the ecosystem to build out elements of the ecosystem, like Miko on the wallets, and we've got Envision in the Guardian stack itself. We've got OCI building out the Tolam stack, which is based on Block Science's design of the automated regression market maker. Evercity and Solid World DAO, who and Flowcarbon, all of whom have kind of carried the scars of working with other chains and have gravitated towards Hedera for the because it's so different and so beneficial for them to come here. All of these elements are actually part of this foundational year, because what we're facing into through this next year or 18 months is just about scaling. It's about bringing more policies onto our open source library, more projects in that use those policies. And as we know, there's no end of demand for these things. So, bringing them to the marketplace should ultimately send the right pricing signals back into the ecosystem, so that you get this virtuous loop with more and more projects coming on, because the pricing is normalizing to a correct level.
Right on. Now, one thing that you said that really resonated with me too was breaking down those three main pillars of the Guardian ecosystem, right? We've got the Guardian itself, which is that open source stack, the marketplaces, and the financial liquidity aspect. But you've been highlighting one project in particular, Tolam Earth, poised to, quote, change everything in the coming months. I want to ask, what is Tolam Earth, and what is the everything it's going to change?
Well, I mean, the Tolam Earth is the first the first automated regression market maker and marketplace that is driven by this design that came out of Block Science for a Guardian-aware, AI-driven matching engine that will predictively buy credits from the market to match the demand that it knows is coming. So, I mean, that's kind of it in a nutshell. It itself is open source, right? So Tolam Earth is the first to market of the first kind of commercialization of this ARM open source stack. We envisage potentially, special purpose arms forming, or other ways of utilizing that technology. I think there'll be a number that we'll see over time. So, but this is the first. And there's a YouTube channel, so I won't kind of repeat what Matthew Porter, the CEO, and Matthew Lawrenson, who comes from OCI and is also the chief strategy officer. So they kind of articulate it way better than I can. The reason I think it's going to change everything is because maybe not in the next 6 months. Maybe it's going to take some time to start revving the engine up and bringing more and more of this sustainability project assets into the marketplace. But I envisage a time where the DeFi community can actually contribute into the refi community. And what I mean by that is, the ability to trade assets or to speculate on these assets is all part of the mechanism to drive the price and get to this global carbon price. So if imagine, and I said this the other day, but imagine being able to trade your way to $1 million of profit by saving the planet at the same time. I mean, that would be a really cool thing to do. And you need supply and demand, you need transparency, you need time, you need analytical tools, which no doubt will develop, around this this marketplace space. And we don't really understand, or sorry, we kind of understand, but we don't really know how long that will take to happen. But looking at what's happened in the Hedera DeFi space, with all the great stuff that's going on in Source Swap and HeliSwap and now Pangolin, and we've got some others coming up, Lehman Swap and others. It's really, really kind of caught fire in the community. And I think the same thing's going to happen in the refi space on Hedera, except it doesn't exist anywhere else because it can't exist anywhere else at this scale. So to your earlier point about, is Hedera the only place that this is going to happen? I think it actually will be for the foreseeable future. And this next bull run that hopefully we'll be leaning into over the course of the next few months to a year, this may well be the thing that creates Hedera to really, really catch fire and take off, because it's not just about the bull run of utility. It's actually something far more important than that, because it becomes real. It's real world issues, and we have a way of actually, providing the interactivity with the marketplace that actually has those beneficial outcomes. So, I only exist on the Kool-Aid, so I may well be way off on this, but I would like to think that this is a real touch point for Hedera being taking off massively.
Now you better be careful, Rob, because someone else who was on the Kool-Aid was Mance, and I remember years ago he was talking about I think he just off the cuff mentioned step function, and for a year or 2 years people were talking about step function. But you've made some really bold, I won't call them predictions.
It's just we kind of expect things to happen as soon as they're said, and exactly. Mance kind of knew what was going on, and but timeframes are out of his hands, right? He wasn't delivering everything. He just knew it was coming. And we all knew it was coming. I actually think that particular step function, as we look back on the TPS charts over time, will just be a tiny little step. The next, and I'm happy to say this, but I think that the next step function is going to make this one look like a tiny thing. But anyway, it might be a ramp. It might not be a step. It might be a ramp. Don't quote me. No one's listening to this anyway, are they?
It's just us and eventually a couple hundred people once this goes to Apple Podcasts. But what I will say is, like, just kind of pulling on the thread a little bit, that must definitely be a challenge for you guys. Like, even some of the experiences that Mance and other folks within Swirlds and the HBAR Foundation have is like the things that you guys, like, object is in rear view mirrors closer than it appears kind of thing. Like, there's probably so many things that you guys see coming, so much knowledge of what could be coming down the pike, and there could very well be a pretty solid timeline on those things that just for whatever reason don't end up working out. And Is it definitely like, it feels like it could be a challenge to measure that, of like, oh, how excited do I get about things? It's not just what you say, but like how you come across. Like sometimes I'm like, ooh, recently, so and so has been coming across much more bold or much more confident. Something's got to be happening. Like, is that something that you guys kind of, when I say you guys, like, those in the foundation of Swirlds and stuff, like, is that something that you kind of grapple with? Is like, how excited can we get? you know?
I think it comes down to character. I'm permanently excited, but I have an engineering perspective rather than a commercial perspective. I'm very excited because I can see the utilization of this amazing technology in so many different ways. And going back to that 2017 conversation with Lehman, he perceived many of these things, not all of them, but the principles of that he and Mance put in place then are coming to bear now, and it's hard. What we're doing is really, really tough. We're not just we're not taking an open source variant of an existing blockchain and issuing a token and pumping it, and then working out later maybe what utility we can add to it. This is all by design, right? Enterprise grade, 100-year, grown-up governance is not something you get overnight. But what we do see increasingly, and the foundation has been really in the vanguard of driving this, along with the Hashgraph Association and Swirlds Labs and others within our market development funds. We're seeing more and more people saying, "Oh yeah, we know about Hedera. We don't have to do the sell anymore. We're seeing that pace grow." And of course, the macroeconomic climate has been terrible over the last year. This is my fourth crypto winter. So, the cycles are there. We've become hardened to them. We know that it's a time to build. And I see a lot of building on Hedera, an awful lot of building. I mean, one knows that startups fail, right? 80 to 90% of startups fail in every sector. Crypto's no different. And so we have to expect that to happen. And, we've all seen the names that have talked a lot about over the years just disappearing in the Hedera space, right? So projects have come and gone, and that's just the normal order of things. But the people don't. And you were talking about community earlier. The people try and fail, and then succeed. And so, which is why I think community is everything. And the Hedera community is one of the best, if not the best, in the Web3 space. The resilience through thick and thin, through all that one center time, through the unfounded, mostly, sometimes founded, FUD that has been thrown from ill-informed outsiders, has created a community that actually is incredibly resilient and now building, right? And I think you mentioned earlier, one of the things that we see a lot of is because it's very easy to build on Hedera, it's API driven. We're seeing no code solutions like Milan's. We're seeing websites that just kind of plug into the APIs and do something in the community. Plus, we're seeing some amazing best-in-class technologies like the wallets that we've got. All of these things actually give confidence to the people in the community to go and do their own thing. And that's at the heart of Web3, I think, is just being able to do your bit, fit into your values. What's your commercial idea? What's your lemonade stand idea? And run with it, and then learn and keep on going. And we're seeing a lot of that. So my excitement really is that thousands of Hederians or HBARbarians will be having similar ideas. How do I make money out of this? How do I fit this into my life? How can I introduce this into my business or into the enterprise that employs me? Because we kind of believe in it, and it's not the it's not just Kool-Aid driven. It's actually based on truth, and seeing those step changes, the ones that we've referenced, and governing council members starting to deliver solutions which take a long time to build, really help with the general kind of sentiment that actually we are in the right place. The anxiety of kind of picking the wrong technology is very real. I've done it for many, many years, which is why I'm still in the Hedera space, because I've, since 2017, I haven't found anything that does the things that I want it to do any better than or at all like Hedera does.
Yeah, those are really great points, and that's a great perspective. And I mean, it speaks to the heart of like a news story I was going to talk about later was Lehman speaking at that Purpose event, and he said something that kind of is in line with the next question I wanted to ask you. He was talking to that a little bit, and I mean, it even goes back further to Lehman's kind of original vision of, carving out your own piece of cyberspace. Like what you were talking about and how you're framing that is pretty much exactly that vision, is like carve out my own piece. And when he was speaking at that Purpose event, there's a video clip in the thread pinned to the top of the Spaces. He says what he's seeing at that event, but I think a little more broadly, is instead of people saying, how can I build my empire? It's more, how can I make the world a better place in a better way? And I kind of think that speaks to kind of like the vision, the ethos of all the organizations involved and built around this kind of Hashgraph technology. And something that you said recently resonated with that as well, which was you used kind of the tagline, this is DeFi with purpose. And Rob, I know you're not, you mentioned you're not like a marketing guy or a business guy, but you're an engineer. But I mean, that's like some golden branding right there. DeFi with purpose.
Yes.
And with the scope,
I should NFT all of these little
I know.
shark bites, shouldn't I?
I know. And with the scope of what you're talking about, are we going to see a redefinition of DeFi? And is this kind of a call to action for the DeFi community to change the way they think about DeFi, moving beyond some of these conventional mechanisms and assets, and moving more into, all like multi-trillions of dollars of these new assets flowing through, and potentially like, could we see some of these assets flowing through like, a Zeus market or a saucer swap, or like, how does this change the DeFi landscape?
Look, I am an engineer, and I'm not arrogant enough to think that I could tell other people what to think or how to operate. But everything does evolve, right? And people are driven by their own values, by the incentive models to which they subscribe, and to the things that kind of make their own self and their tribe, better off. And that's what, DeFi is driven primarily by speculation, by yield, by, staking. And those are primitive mechanisms which, need to be in place. The values then kind of become overlaid onto that. And, DeFi with purpose was just an off the cuff comment, but that's kind of where we're going with this. If you can integrate, it's all tokens, right? So everything on a public ledger as an asset that is tokenized is a property right, and you can do whatever you like with it because you own the keys. So you can take a Guardian-based token and fractionalize it and turn it into a reward point, or you can take a Guardian token and with its metadata and convert that into an NFT that actually carries some kind of utility within a game. It's just that real world connection between the metaverse, the cyber worlds, the shared worlds of Lehman's vision, and real world assets. And the Guardian is actually at its heart just a policy workflow engine. So it takes policies with data and it tokenizes them. And we're using it obviously for sustainability, but that kind of model can be used in other contexts. So assets can, DeFi decentralized finance isn't really about decentralized finance now. It's about trading with things of value, and we all kind of attribute value to the things which we value by definition. It might be not someone else's, but you find someone who wants that thing, and then you can trade it. That thing can be pegged to something intrinsic, something in the real world, like a Guardian token, or something which has no intrinsic value, but actually you know, like a collector's card or something which actually you end up valuing through the utility of the trade. So I guess my rambly point is that we're converging around these things, and it's not just black and white. You know, it's not DeFi turning into refi. There's a blend here because it's about people, and it's how people, individuals, want to use these tools to create value in their own lives. And my desire is to provide the tools to people who actually have a more sustainability-minded mindset, and they want to make the world a better place for their children and future generations as well as themselves. And once we give them the tools, once we gamify it, once we provide the ability for them to actually and demonstrably do the right thing, I think they will. So, you know, the jury's out on that, I guess, but the world's in a pretty poor state at the moment. But I like to think that, you know, given the right incentive models and the right tools, then people basically will do the right thing.
I love that. You know, we need that kind of optimism, especially right now. And again, I really appreciate your time. I just have two more questions for you. This has just been a really fascinating conversation. I want to switch gears just before we wrap things up to coupons, because that's something that's always on my mind. I don't know if you have any insights to share about it, but anyone who listens to the show knows I talk about the new 8112 coupon standard a lot. Now that the holiday season is kind of over and we approach Q2, what are the last steps needed before 8112 can go live at a larger scale? We've seen like some mom and pop shops implement it. We've heard about some types of resistance that maybe retailers would have with it. We've seen brands really pushing for it. We know with their roadmap, they were kind of foreseeing a ramp up into this year. And, you know, with everything kind of in place, now like the next 6 to 9 months is really the golden window. Like what, you know, where are we at with 8112? And I don't want to directly ask like, when is it going to go live? Because I don't think it's one of those things we know exactly when, but where are we at in that process?
I'm going to disappoint you because I honestly don't know. It's been a while since I've spoken to the Coupon Bureau guys and Brandy, and they had a lot to do, right? Their intent was to set up the standard first and then build a business to commercialize the standard, which, you know, is a very smart way of doing it. But other than that, I can't. I'm sorry, I can't help you with that one, Brandon. I can go away and find out, and then if I'm allowed to say anything, then I'm happy to come back.
Please do, yeah. Because I've been like anyone who listens to this show, I've been almost every week I talk about coupons in some.
Yeah,
just be right. Just because.
Trust me, I'd love it to go live.
I know.
Well. This is one of those you know, mass adoption, mass effect, real world problem use cases that Hedera is absolutely designed for. But the real world isn't usually a straight, you know, line. And I suspect there are a few commercial things that need to be put in place, and headwinds, and, you know, things that we don't know about. So, you know, let me find out, or try and find out, and if I'm able to, then I'll come back. Otherwise, you know.
Yeah, please do.
I guess it'll happen when it happens. I've certainly seen nothing, and I have not any evidence whatsoever that they're not continuing to build on Hedera per all the previous stuff that they've publicly announced. So there's no cause for alarm about that at all. And I've seen a little bit on Twitter about, are you still building on Hedera? We've heard nothing. That's the immediate gratification of crypto Twitter. Doesn't really work very well in startup land or any commerce. But yeah, I don't think that's that they've switched technologies or anything like that. I think it's all still good. It just takes a while.
Right on. Okay, great. Yeah, I'd love to know more. I think that I think what at the core what it's really about is, and I think for me speaking as a HBAR Hederian, when I look at someone like my mom or a grandparent or something, when we have a coupon standard running at that scale, it makes, Hedera and that network really tangible in a different way, because you can kind of say like, hey mom, like these, all these coupons and things that you use, and probably the user experience will improve. That's when you can actually say like, you're actually using this network, and you can go and you can just buy a little piece of it and start to illustrate that difference between a network like the internet that you can't really own, and then this kind of trust layer that these different things can run on, and a touch point that's a product that regular folks use all the time. Banking is a great example as well, is just allowing others to have that little light bulb moment and kind of go, oh, like if I'm really interested in this technology and use it in my everyday life, I could grab a little piece of that. I could have some influence on that. I could be involved in that. That's such it's a completely new way to look at crypto and explain it to people.
Yes, I agree. And a different demographic, right? This is about reaching out into new demographics and not that rarefied, probably group that we've got on the spaces here. Reaching your granny or your mom, or the friends who have nothing to do with crypto. That's real world mass adoption right there, and it's like I said, it's a problem that needs to be solved. So it'll resonate when it becomes obvious, and hopefully we're not too far away from that.
That's awesome. Well, this has been a fantastic conversation. I do have to get on to the news, but I wanted to ask you one last question. And I ask this to most people that I have on the show. What's a project in the Hedera ecosystem that you're really interested in that might not be getting the attention it deserves? Is there an undiscovered gem out there that's worth highlighting?
That's a really hard question for me to answer, because I see, many, if not most of the projects that come through the foundation. I don't know. I just think everything's, maybe I've got more kind of perfect knowledge than most, but I think there is a delivery time frame for most of these projects. I'm perfect. Okay. I have one. I've rambled my way to an answer. IoT. I really, really wanted that initiative we did last year with Greg and some friends down here in Australia around helium, and getting it feels like a layer 2 on Hedera, which provides the right economic incentives for the gateways that need to be put in place such that IoT devices across multiple projects using LoRaWAN or other kind of short distance technologies can operate. Because I'm certain that Hedera is the base layer for all of those things to happen. But it was a really hard, we were never going to convince the helium community that were kind of bought out by Solana, who backed Nova Labs, and demonstrated that they weren't true to their principles of governance. So that was never going to happen. But actually, through the process of that, I think it proved to me that we're absolutely got every right to play in the IoT space. So I would love to see more of that. We're obviously seeing a bit of IoT project data coming in through Guardian, because a lot of the sustainability projects gather their data at the device level. But I mean, some of you may have seen the papers and articles I've written on smart cities. I see IoT as kind of foundational infrastructure, along with micropayments, on which to build smart cities, both in the metaverse and in real life, in the meat space. So I'd love to see more of that. It also overlays onto things like supply chain use cases and track and trace. And foundational infrastructure to support that would be awesome. We've got Neuron. Neuron's doing some pretty amazing things, and they've announced some stuff, and they've announced stuff. They haven't announced lots of other stuff, so I'm really excited to see that come into production. And we may even have another go at the helium thing, given Solana's woes. So there you go. That's my answer. That's the next stage really is not about building, or actually that's wrong to say. I was going to say it's not about building businesses that just use the Hedera consensus service, because the Hedera consensus service is actually I think the number one kind of blockchain killer, if you like, application. It's all very well having tokenization, having smart contracts, but the HCS is really underappreciated in terms of the real revolution that it's brought. Whole blockchains were built entirely on the provenance, utility, and we get it virtually for free. So use of HCS is kind of going to be background. And when I talk about, in the future, every business will be built on Hedera, but they won't know it. It's mainly because of that. It's mainly because kind of just plugging into HCS and notarizing your data, or sharing facts, or being able to be independently verifiable or auditable are all, very, very easy to achieve now using the Hedera consensus service. So that will be a backbone of lots of additional utility that will be built on it. And I think this next phase, next 2 to 3 years, we'll start seeing a lot more really sophisticated and nuanced uses of all the native services. The use of notarization plus tokenization and smart contract decentralization is going to really enable some really, really cool things to happen. Plus, we haven't really seen the AppNet approach, that AppNet architectural pattern, which effectively enables us to have a secure business logic layer on top of Hedera. So that's a very enterprise-focused architectural pattern. So there's lots of things that now the Hedera builders have got to grips with the core network services. We'll be able to start building some much more sophisticated solutions, which aren't constrained by by blockchain thinking. It's either decentralized or it's not. That's not the case with Hedera. It can be shades of gray in between, as is appropriate for a particular business solution or problem that's being sought to be solved. And that's what I'm really excited about, seeing some of those coming to market over the course of the next couple of years.
Well, Rob, I really
sorry, I've used your entire time just kind of shooting the breeze with you.
No,
sorry about that.
That's fine. No, don't apologize. I mean, anyone listening knows. I mean, like I always joke, I started this show back in October 2021, and back in that time, it was hard sometimes to fill the hour, and now it's like impossible to keep the show under an hour. Regularly, the show's like an hour and a half, 2 hours. So don't even worry about it. At this point, I'm like, whatever. There's news to talk about. There's people that reach out that want to chat on the show. I'm down for it. So just really appreciate you giving your time. And it was just so insightful to have a conversation with you. So really appreciate it. I mean, before I move on, was there anything you wanted to plug or any shout outs you wanted to give or any call to action you want to give to the community?
Just keep building. And if there's anything that you want to reach out to me for, my DMs are always open across most channels. So feel free. I might deflect you to someone who's better placed to answer, but feel free to reach out anytime, anyone.
Okay. Appreciate you, Rob. Thanks so much. I'm going to put you back down to listeners.
Thank you. Bye.
All right. Awesome. Okay. So great convo. I mean, it is crazy. When I started the show, I never really thought I would have guests on the show. And now it feels like almost every week at this point, I got a guest on the show. So, things keep growing, things keep evolving. I'm always using this show as a kind of like an indicator for myself of how the ecosystem is growing. The more and more difficult that it gets to keep the show on time, the more bullish I should be on HBAR, I guess. So great chat. I'm definitely going to listen. I'm going to listen to this episode again and try to absorb a lot of that. So on to some of our other stories today. And we've got quite a bit to talk about, but I'll try to get through this so everyone, gets off in time. 'Cause there's probably a good TV show that's coming out on a Sunday or on a Monday morning in Sydney. So off of the back of last week's episode, which was, talking about long episodes. That was a 3-hour episode where we went through a detailed timeline of the recent exploit on Hedera. We did see an update from Hedera within the original blog post that highlighted some other elements of what happened based off of some questions from the community. And there was a couple key things from this update. One of the key things was how I guess not the protocol, but kind of the order of operations that it took to turn off the proxies to the main net. And of course, now folks are more aware of why the proxies exist and those different phases as to which they'll then be handed off to nodes. And I'll just read an excerpt of this update on the Hedera blog. When the attacker began stealing tokens from the DEXs on March 9th, the Hedera network operations team, which was Hedera's CIO and CISO, Alex, Swirlds Labs, Dr. Lehman Baird, who also co-chairs the council's technical steering and product committee, and Swirlds Labs DevOps staff, together made the decision to disable the proxy. So those were the folks that were charged with disabling the proxies. And that prevented the exploit from being used to illicitly gain privileges to tokens managed by smart contracts, which would allow them to be stolen, and prevented the possibility of it being deployed to attack another potentially vulnerable implementations across the network. So that was a key insight from that update. There is other information in there, but that was an answer we were looking for. We were looking for, what were the actions taken to make that happen? And now we have some of those answers. And now the communities move forward with these debates and conversations surrounding, will this have to happen again? If there is some kind of other exploit, when the proxies are handed off to the nodes, will it ever happen again? So lots of healthy discussion happening in the community. And I really appreciate Hedera following up on that. That was good to see. Also too, we also have an update from Swirlds Labs just in regards to that, there's multiple billions of HBAR going from Hedera to Swirlds. Obviously, those were communicated to the community over the last months, and those were executed. And these types of things are complex, right? And sometimes the ways in which these things are communicated to the community, which sometimes like they're looking at things within the context of their experience on other networks and how things are handled on other networks. I think that more often than not, the way in which Hedera and all the other affiliated organizations handle things is definitely different to what we traditionally see with other crypto networks. So seeing this payment go through, and maybe some context lacking for folks new to the ecosystem, it can sometimes appear as though, who's this company? Why are they getting billions of HBAR? What's going on? But as we know, Swirlds is a governing council member. A lot of folks that were within Hedera moved to Swirlds, and Swirlds Labs does a lot of the day-to-day and also high-level, things that Hedera has to do. Like when we looked at Davos, the representatives for Hedera were folks from Swirlds and the governing council, like DLA Piper and Avery Dennison and stuff like that. So really the network is the governing council, and there are certain services that governing council members will provide to Hedera, and they'll want to be compensated for that. So as the network is bootstrapped, and kind of brought online and moves through these different phases of decentralization, these types of things have to happen. And what I do appreciate is Swirlds Labs publishing an article that does feel, like a response to a lot of conversation within the community and also the broader crypto ecosystem. And basically, there's a few key points within this article. And the one that I want to tackle is just the first question is, why is next year's budget prepaid this year? And what I want to do is I just want to kind of read verbatim this piece of the article, just because I think this was the key element to all of this that was confusing to some people, right? I mean, HBAR is sub 10 cents right now. Does that go up? How does that impact future payments? Why is next year's budget prepaid this year? So, quote, there are a number of reasons that Swirlds Labs thought it made good sense to receive prepayment of its budget under the contract with Hedera. When we were forming Swirlds Labs, we were very focused on establishing it as a truly independent entity, which in our view entailed, among other things, having responsibility for our own financial management, risk mitigation, and administrative controls. Swirlds Labs wanted sufficient latitude to manage the contract's budgeted HBARs in light of the volatility and uncertainty in the crypto market. Prepayment of the annual budget allows Swirlds Labs to exercise its own judgment and discretion about how to manage our business risks and financial affairs. In addition, one of the things we heard from existing staff during the reorganization and from candidates during our hiring process were concerns around the medium-term economic viability of Swirlds Labs as a standalone entity. To hire the best talent in the industry, it is necessary to reassure them that we have the resources to commit to them in the future years. The prepayments from Hedera also help provide that assurance. So really what this is about is, with the backdrop of this kind of bear market and all these different things happening, it is really important to not do these kinds of half measures, right? Hedera, the HBAR Foundation, and Swirlds Labs, for better or for worse, are still taking these full measure approaches. And I think that's a big reason why, again, with my conversation with Rob, there's so much innovation and building happening in this ecosystem, which again, in contrast to a lot of other networks, Hedera and this network and the things that are coming online and the fact that it is literally the most used DLT on the planet, goes to show that, taking these full measures is important, especially when we feel like we're on that kind of razor's edge with things. So I get why they did this. I do think that, it is worth the community still having these conversations around this. But I do, I appreciate the transparency. And it can't be understated. Swirlds Labs is really the workhorse of this organization. It's got Lehman, right? It's got Mance. It's got these core people. And Swirlds Labs is really going to help build out the network and reach these next phases. And I mean, they got all sorts of other projects they're working on, right? Like they've got DREC, which when we take a bit of a higher level look, a bit of a 50,000 foot view, on all fronts, right? Marketing, awareness, mass adoption, Swirlds Labs putting out a product like DREC, and we've talked about this at length, but it is such a fundamental piece of infrastructure for the Web3 ecosystem as a whole, right? The ability to use these technologies in a non-custodial fashion, but not be afraid of losing your private key and solving that, what feels like the last problem, the last obstacle that's in the way of mass adoption, and providing that as an open source tool to all networks. I mean, that alone is such a huge statement, right? And positions Swirlds in a particular way, and also the network. So honestly, I think this is good. Also, too, the faster that we can get HBAR into circulation, the better, as long as we're in the right market and it doesn't have like too much of a negative impact. But that's just kind of what's happening. And at the end of the day, most of the HBAR will return to the treasury at some point and cycle through. So I think that this is a solid move. I think that, of course, we're going to continue to see conversations around it. And we're going to continue to see conversations around it because, again, this is a really unique setup. The very idea of the governing council is really new to the Web3 space. I watch folks like BitBoy or these other, very prominent figures in crypto and influencers and stuff. They still refer to governing council members as like network validators or nodes or something. So I think that Hedera is going to do what they're going to do. The information's there, but I definitely expect more debate and confusion and stuff like that around it. But I think that these kinds of, moments of transparency and opportunities to educate people is crucial. So, like, huge kudos to Swirlds for taking the time to break that down. Also, we've got updates in regards to CBDCs and CBDC payments. IDEMIA is out, and it's about offline central bank digital currency. They offer offline payments, driving financial inclusion, higher payment efficiency, and savings on environmental costs. It's also being built on the Hedera platform. So there is a white paper that was published. There's a PDF, and I linked to the Reddit art. Like, there's a post in the Reddit community, the Hedera subreddit. And often for these kinds of resources, I love to just link to the Reddit post because sometimes the comments have some really insightful information and tidbits, and one of which I'll point out. But I mean, in the white paper, we see the partners for this, right? We see EM Tech, we see the HBAR Foundation, we see Hedera, but we also see Polygon, we see Ripple, we see all these kinds of usual suspects. And when we look at the broader bouquet of CBDC initiatives, it's really clear that this is going to be a big piece of our lives going forward. Now, that is to say, I don't think, and I've heard people mention this before, I don't think that CBDCs are something that are approaching like a freight train. I really think that for us, they're really still just entering a very experimental stage, and in other developing economies actually going live. We were talking last week about WeCoin from, I think it was WePay, that is basically taking all of the different islands and all the different separate fiat currencies that they have, and all the different digital wallets that they have, and starting to bring those together, offering those different kinds of settlements and remittance tests. And even like, was it last year? Maybe it was even earlier. I think it was last year. Maybe it was 2021. I'm pretty sure it was last year when we saw Shanahan Bank and Standard Bank do those remittance tests between banks, right? Taking fiat, turning it to a stable, sending it to the next bank as a stable, converting it back to fiat. All these different things are happening. And before we see CBDCs at the scale that we're kind of envisioning, probably we're going to see government-backed stable coins. And that's something that we've heard a lot of folks in the ecosystem talk about. So this is a really interesting space to watch. There's a lot of stuff in this white paper that's worth checking out, but I wanted to just highlight someone in the Reddit community that highlighted one element of this white paper that is worth pointing out. So they say, quote, offline capability means that a payer and a payee must be able to transact. And that also, too, real quick, that's a huge piece of this use case is the fact that it is offline. And that's required for CBDCs, right? When you think about paying for things in cash, because that's ultimately what these will replace, that doesn't require a connection. You need to be able to do these transactions with all sorts of different merchants in a way that you don't need to be connected to a network. You can just tap your card. And this use case in particular, it leverages fingerprinting and all these different types of things. There's actually I'm pretty sure I shared the video for this in the Twitter thread pinned to the top of the spaces, and it kind of shows the use case in action, which is really interesting. But Perfectability 1190 on Reddit says, again, quote, offline capability means that a payer and a payee must be able to transact anytime and anywhere, even if the network is down, even if a third party cannot be reached to validate or settle the transaction. A real offline transaction provides instant finality, the ability of a payment to be completed and confirmed immediately without the need for further processing or confirmation. This means that once the payment is made, it is considered final and cannot be reversed or disputed. This is in contrast to traditional payment systems where payments can take up to 3 days to be processed and confirmed, and where there is a risk of disputes or charge reversals, anytime, anywhere. Even with the ubiquitous network availability, there are still many dead zones without coverage. In emerging economies, data services are scarce outside of urban areas and too expensive for a majority of the population. Even when data service is available, network disruptions can happen at any time, and most common during times of heavy network usage or when there are technical issues with the network infrastructure, such as a power outage or hardware failure. Network disruptions can also be caused by natural disasters such as storms, hurricanes, or earthquakes, which can damage the network infrastructure, cause outages, all those different types of things. So that Reddit user really summarized it well, the kind of those key pain points and the needs of truly what, when we talk about CBDCs, truly what they're about. And with my conversation with Rob, when we talk about bringing those billion people on that are unbanked, that don't have access to these things, right? It's not just about innovating on existing systems that we have in these developing economies. It's also about elevating developing economies and people from all walks of life to participate in things that we may take for granted, right? And also, too, something that always comes to mind when we talk about this, just before we move on to our next story, is when we look at power grids and stuff. Here in Canada, the power grid that we have is like, I don't know, it's like 80 years old, right? And it was designed to last for, 40, 50 years. And when you have new developing cities being built out, they're not necessarily built with the traditional power grid and infrastructure that we have, because you move on from that. That's no longer the starting point. That's no longer, point A when you're trying to get to Z. And that's why it's so interesting to watch some of these things being built on Hedera, because you can start to see what are the new starting points. What is the new zero? And I think that that's a conversation that gets me really excited and kind of brings us to our next story, which was a conversation on Hello Future Buzz's Twitter Spaces. Folks know Hello Future Buzz, Elizabeth Chase, OG community member, really, really awesome spaces that she has every Thursday. And she had on as a guest Carmel Cadet, who is the CEO of EM Tech, previously at IBM. And Carmel is really been on the forefront, at least within the Hedera ecosystem, in regards to CBDCs and her desire to leverage this technology with her initiatives. And I mean, I remember I was watching some kind of U.S. committee hearing that she was, presenting on. So she's really in the forefront of these things. And she shared some really, really interesting insights on this Twitter Spaces that I just wanted to touch on quickly here. She says, quote, "I'm not in the business of creating a government-controlled currency." What she specifies is, we use central banking money every day. How do we make that modern? And her goal is to put cash on DLTs. Right. And that really speaks to that last story we were talking about with IDEMIA and kind of those offline transactions. That is literally putting cash on a DLT. And they want to convince central banks to use a public DLT, right? It's like Rob was talking about with the ESG space. It's really important to make these types of things audible and visible and not opaque to the public, to other businesses. And that's one thing to do on ESG. But when we talk about, central banking money and government-backed stablecoins, all these different types of things, ideally you have those running on a public ledger. That is the ideal thing, but obviously you're going to run into resistance. There are knowledge gaps, and it's going to take a lot of time, right? So I really loved hearing that. Also, too, there's always concerns about, are they going to track people's money, all these different types of things. Carmel did mention, she hasn't met a central banker that wants to track everyone's money. So I think that those are definitely legitimate concerns. And I mean, when we look at some of the different revelations we've had in regards to how different governments employ certain types of surveillance or all those different types of things, those are completely legitimate concerns. But when we go back down to the scale of just people really in the early phases of these different types of developments and technologies, there's optimism in the air. And we also recently did see some announcements regarding the FedNow system. And I've seen people kind of go, oh, like, is this Hedera doing this, or they're not using a Hedera? What is this about? It actually has nothing to do with that. Carmel clarified the FedNow system isn't a payment system. It's not a change in digital currency and how the Fed issues currency. It's just a new system for basically, transferring things between different entities at a high level. So the FedNow system isn't the purported kind of digital dollar or CBDC that we've been kind of watching that story develop in the US. It's nothing related to that. It's something different. So it's good to get that clarification. Also, too, it's interesting to learn that Carmel doesn't hold any HBAR. And I found this interesting because I put myself in her shoes, potentially meeting with these central bankers and talking about these use cases that leverage, the Hedera network. And I totally understand from an optics standpoint, if she were to be holding HBAR, right, that might send a particular message about what her objective is. So I guess, yeah, it is important for her not to hold HBAR. Maybe a bummer, right? But makes sense. Makes sense. Let's see what else we got going on here. Calaxy. This one is really interesting. So, folks unfamiliar, Spencer Dinwiddie of NBA fame, Solo Ceesay, who now recently became the CEO of Calaxy after they closed $26 million in funding. I actually had Solo as a guest on the show last year. I can't remember exactly when, but had a fantastic conversation with him. He wasn't at a point at that time where he could really talk about what was coming down the pipeline, what people could expect. Really what it came down to was, because the founder of Calaxy is, a major celebrity and an NBA player, and because they are dealing with tokenized assets and all those different types of things, and also factoring in, all the confusion surrounding regulation and, what is a security, what is not in the scope of Web3. Any misstep that, Calaxy makes, there's going to be all sorts of different people just waiting to jump on that and, probably pop up lawsuits and all these different types of things. And so that reframed a couple things for me. And I understand now why a lot of these use cases within the last, 6 to 9 months have kind of gone into a bit of a holding pattern, right? It makes sense. We've even seen some elements on the Hedera roadmap enter that same phase, like community nodes, all these different things. I think it's a smart move, right? It definitely bums me out, but it is a smart move. I had been using Calaxy, the beta, for a long time, for over a year. I think I started using it November 2021. Great app, super fun. But what's interesting is the new Calaxy blog launched, and the latest article is Calaxy is coming. And they published some videos of the app, and apparently there's a refresh coming. They've also pivoted away from developing native apps for iOS and stuff, and they're focusing on these web apps and everything. So they're going to be a lot more agile, and they're going to be able to be much more iterative with how they put out these releases and develop their apps. So that's exciting. Really, the other side of this is Calaxy really transforms temporarily into an infrastructure play, because they also, were building the Creators Galaxy protocol, which is an open source, arguably kind of like layer 2 on Hedera, that allows applications like Calaxy to create these, creator economies with all of these different, functionalities, right? Like having a wallet, being able to send crypto back and forth between people via DMs, posting things, minting NFTs, having different functionalities like you'd find maybe in OnlyFans or Cameo. And so all these different mechanisms, Calaxy really bundled up into really a pillar of infrastructure. They also launched their DAO. They had a DAO vote. They did an airdrop of Calaxy. So we went from this use case being relatively quiet to really coming online. And this stuff was published just recently. And I will say there's not like a ton of new information. But what I will say is, within the context of the fact that they didn't really want to slow things down and they didn't really want to kind of fade into the background a bit, it was just because they had to play it safe. Now, it definitely seems like they've got solid footing and they're going to be going live with some stuff. And this is going to be really one to watch, right? For folks unfamiliar with Calaxy, like they're really going to onboard a lot of talent, a lot of celebrities, a lot of users into an app where they may not know they're using a DLT. They may not know they're using a Hedera. They're just hoping to provide another digital wallet, a social media platform to allow creators true ownership over their work, their identity, things that they do, things that they mint, and do it in a way that, again, obfuscates the Web3 aspect of this and makes it just another social media app. So it's not really something catered to the Hedera community, but it's NFTs, it's crypto, it's HBAR, this is built right on the native layer, and they're really excited about that aspect. So it's a social media app, and it's coming. So I'd expect something soon from them. I mean, the blog post definitely indicates that some stuff's happening. Also, too, just kind of following up on the aftermath of the attack on the mainnet, one of the main players in that was Pangolin. Last week, I did have the CEO of Pangolin on the show as a guest to go through that kind of detailed timeline. If you haven't gone back and listened to that episode, it was really, really great. Definitely do that. But the real question was, after the proxies were brought back online, after things were able to kind of start moving again on the network, what would happen? Because right up until the proxies were disabled, we saw liquidity being sucked out of the network. We saw all sorts of different things happening. And when the network came back online, we were kind of like, are people going to dump HBAR, or are they going to venture back into these liquidity pools on these DEXs? And Scruffy Chuck from Pangolin DEX put out a post on March 12th, so a while ago. I assume this is further moved along than on the 12th, but the TVL went back up 50%. So in the days following the exploit, of the liquidity that was lost, they regained 50% of that within 2 days. So speaking to the resilience of the community, it's not just what the community is saying in the general sentiment. It's literally the community putting their money where their mouth is. We didn't see a crash in HBAR price. We didn't see a crash in TVL on the network. We saw the opposite, right? And that was really, really telling to me. And even today, we're still seeing that. And things are kind of back to normal. So that was great to see. But that was a good update from Pangolin DEX that I just wanted to highlight. Also, too, it's been 2 years since the Hashpack folks met on Discord and came together to develop a wallet. And there's a great thread published by Jacob from Hashpack. And it's worth highlighting. I mean, it's a Twitter thread. It's really short, so I'll just read it. But I mean, Hashpack really being a key pillar of the community. Jacob says this: from our humble beginnings of meeting in Discord, we bootstrapped the MVP of Hashpack, all while working full-time jobs. We met each other about 6 months later on our first video call. Shortly after, we incorporated and launched the Chrome extension in late October 2021. I think a lot of people will remember that. After a steady launch, we gained about 1,000 users in the first few months. From there, things skyrocketed, and we had over 50,000 monthly active users by early quarter 2 2022. And that was, of course, at the time, if folks remember, we had Exact Wallet for NFTs. That's how folks were collecting NFTs and minting NFTs. Exact Wallet was effectively, decommissioned. So there was this, chasm for weeks and months within the community where we weren't really able to buy, sell, trade NFTs. And that's kind of right at the time when Hashpack kind of swooped in and arguably remove that logjam from the ecosystem. So at this point, Hashpack users account for 90% of the Hedera ecosystem, with over $300 million of assets stored in user wallets, and 95% of Hedera dApps integrated with Hashpack. So, I mean, huge shout out to the team, huge success. And, I think that it's really a really good thing that we're seeing in the ecosystem is more wallets joining into the ecosystem. And it's not a good thing it's not necessarily a good thing to have one wallet that 95% of the community uses. I think that most of the community uses multiple wallets. I use a variety of different wallets because they all have their own kind of special things that they do. But putting all that aside, right? This is a little team that got together. They removed a logjam ecosystem wide. They got things moving, and any serious dApp, right? Zeus Market, Saucer Swap, any other DEX, any other NFT marketplace, any other DeFi protocol, like all these different types of things, it uses Hashpack, and it's definitely worth something cheersing to, right? So cheers to the Hashpack team. Congrats on 2 years. I had the pleasure of a couple weeks ago, or I think it was, a couple weeks ago, I had Tyler from Hashpack on. We were talking about Secure Trade version 2. I've had them on the show. Great team. Love those guys. So shout out. And what else we got going on here? We actually covered, we managed to actually cover a few of these news stories with Rob. I'm scrolling through and I'm like, oh, we touched on a couple of these already. Great. So we're actually a little further ahead than I thought. So one thing I wanted to talk about is music. And there was a recent article published in a crypto publication talking about, a prominent NFT app migrating to Hedera from Ethereum. That app is a platform being built called Mint. Full disclosure, they are a client of my company being Dirksen and Davenport Incorporated. We're helping launch their product. But it was just a jumping off point because I definitely see so many other use cases too, like Seeky, TuneFM. TuneFM has been around since arguably before before HBAR was minted. Like TuneFM has been developing forever. And on the artist side, there are so many artists, and when I say artists, I mean musicians within the Hedera ecosystem. It would actually shock you to talk to founders of these projects and find out that they're actually musicians as well. And I truly see this being the year that what I'll call the Hedera music scene starts forming, because when we look, like, I hear this a lot too, like has the NFT ecosystem peaked? Will we ever see things get this big again on Ethereum and blah blah blah? We're not even close. We will have peaked when the tokenized art world mirrors the actual art world. And in the actual art world, music is one of the biggest, if not the biggest components of art, right? And in the NFT world, it's a little sliver right now. And the music ecosystem and industry is just, as an artist myself, I'm a drummer, I'm a front man, I was in a rock and roll band, I get royalties from Spotify and all those types of things. It's horrible. It takes me 9 months to get a royalty from Spotify of someone who streams something. So it's an archaic system. Also, too, for indie artists that don't have label support and don't have these different things, it's so hard to get that ownership of your own income and the value that you've driven. You have to fight. And when we look at Web3, it's a completely different story. And there's so many different opportunities. So just to touch on this, we are starting to see more broadly in the crypto and Web3 ecosystem, music start to become more and more prominent. And what I'm hoping is that because of the carbon negative nature of the network, and all the other special things that the Hashgraph brings, and also just the culture of our community, like I was talking about with Rob, like the Hedera community is really top tier. This is primed to be a hotbed for independent artists, and it's going to depend on finding the right ways in which we can articulate the value propositions for independent artists to them. Right? This could very well be the chance for musicians and artists to write the rules. This is a decentralized network, or, as decentralized as you can get at this point. And it's fair. So I think that if you're a musician and you're on Hedera, the best thing that you can do is mint some music, right? That is an art form. That is a slice of pie that needs to be grown. That's what I want to see. And I know that the infrastructure, the marketplaces, the wallets don't necessarily serve that art form yet. But the only way that we're going to see music become more prominent in this ecosystem is for it to exist. And we've had, I worked with my business partner, Joshua Dirksen. We worked on the Hash Shanty. We got that minted. Maybe I'll just quickly mention, I do have I'm not just, preaching here. I'm actually going to mint some music myself as well. But that's what it's going to take. If you're an artist, start minting music, please, because that's the only way that we're going to start to push and be able to start to mold and start to do these things before the big guys come in. And that's where the power is. The power comes back to the artist. The network is just a part of it. And just as we did with NFTs, right? And just as NFTs influenced Ethereum and created just this incredible movement and helped shape, the art world. Let's do that with music, and let's do it on Hedera. Because like we were talking about ESG and sustainability and how Hedera is really going to be the place to do that. I feel the same way about music, just as a musician. So if you've got music, mint it, please. Also too, we've seen just flipping back to a little bit of not flipping back, but flipping over to a bit of a different conversation that has definitely started to unfold that we touched on a little bit was AI. And this is less about me kind of like talking about all the cool AI stuff going on, but just something specific that I wanted to highlight. With the recent addition of ChatGPT 4 and a lot of these AIs to parse and review longer form text and more detailed code and, pass the bar exam and all these different types of things. I wanted to surface a tweet from John Wingate, who is, as most folks know at Bank Social. He says, quote, "If you run an open source project, you need to run your code through AI for exploits. Do it now." And I'll say that as well. I've seen a couple people on Twitter paste their smart contracts, their audited smart contracts code into, different AIs like ChatGPT 4. And as these continue to get more advanced, and that AI will find exploits, and they'll use certain prompts, right? Like they'll say, you are a smart contract security auditing firm, and you're being tasked with X, Y, and Z, review this contract. And it will point specific things out, and it will suggest fixes. And as we know, sometimes AI can't be entirely accurate. But I'll tell you, now that this stuff exists, there will be people going out there and just grabbing your smart contracts and grabbing your code, running it through AI, seeing if that AI can find exploits, and having the AI potentially give them insights into how to act upon those things. And this is kind of the world that we're entering. So that's just one thing I wanted to highlight, and especially to the Hedera community as we are starting to grow and as many of these projects are just getting footing, right? I think that, this may be a new checkbox, right, to add to the old pre-launch thing. Maybe this is something useful you could do before sending your contracts or code off to audit, right? I think that this is something we're going to have to start to do. But, wanted to highlight that tweet from John. Good eye. Speaking of this kind of stuff, we've got Lehman Swap that is a new DEX that is entering the fray. Hopefully it'll be launching at some point in April, I've heard. I don't know if that's public. I don't know, but I think, that's kind of, I've heard that in so many different conversations. I have no idea who that's from. I've just seen it mentioned a couple times. But their recent update does lend to that because Lehman Swap have run some successful tests. And it's important because Lehman Swap isn't based on the Uniswap version 2 smart contracts. And that's important because when we look at, Saucer Swap or Heli Swap or any of the, prominent DEXs on Hedera, they are utilizing the either Uniswap version 2 or version 3. And Lehman Swap is going to be leveraging Trident, which is different and has a few different aspects to it. They talk about it a lot. I definitely encourage you to head over to Lehman Swap and dive into that. I don't necessarily have an opinion on the DEX. I'll have to check it out when it goes live. But I just wanted to highlight this because I do find it interesting to see another smart contract-based DEX coming to Hedera that isn't based off of Uniswap. And I think that's something worth highlighting. There is this kind of spectrum that we're seeing where on one side you've got kind of the traditional Uniswap dexes, on the other side you've got things like HBAR Suite with their smart node technology and more AppNet approach that doesn't use smart contracts and just uses the layer 1 protocol natively. So lots of interesting things happening. We've got a new DEX coming, and it isn't based on Uniswap. Really cool, really interesting. Keep it on your radar. Check it out. Also, an update from Headstarter. They're announcing a partnership with C14 to enable direct fiat onboarding for HBAR and other cryptos, and make it seamless. And they put out a tweet. I don't know if they have a link to an announcement. Oh, yeah, they do. Perfect. Or is this a link? I don't think this is a link. It's just a video clip with some logos. So this is interesting. Maybe it's a bit of a tweezer. Sorry, not a tweezer. My God, it's been a long time. A teaser. And this has been a difficult thing to do, especially in the environment that we find ourselves with, the difficulty in onboarding and offboarding fiat. We've seen people posting notices from their banks with the bank restricting their ability to onboard fiat into an exchange. So when we talk about, Headstarter saying, quote, "We're partnering with C14 to make fiat onboarding directly from your credit card seamless. Access HBAR and your favorite HTS token straight from the Headstarter dApp." I mean, that's really crazy, and I want to learn more about it. I thought it was a link to an article, and it's not. It's just a little video clip, but I'm sure we'll learn more about it. And I think that as we start to see how the whole stablecoin thing pans out with USDC and USDT and all those different types of things, what it really comes down to is people will want to participate in the ecosystem that we have here with the different HTS assets that we have, but they won't necessarily have an easy way to grab HBAR. If they can do it with their credit card, that's pretty cool. So I'm going to be keeping an eye on that. And let me see here. We do have another cool update that we'll talk about just before we wind down the spaces. HederaCon. So I was on a spaces last week. I've also talked with Elizabeth too, from Hello Future Buzz. And in early October this year in Dallas, there is going to be HederaCon, which has participation from, I do believe, the HBAR Foundation and Swirlds, and Lehman and Mance will be there. And I think there's like something like 70 requests for vendor booths. And so it is growing into this kind of crazy thing. But HederaCon is, they're just at the early phases, right? They are looking for the correct venue. They are forming a kind of planning committee, but this is pretty big. We've seen ETH Denver, right? We've seen NFT NYC. We've seen Consensus. We've seen these events and these conventions that Hedera and related parties will have a presence at. And that's really exciting to see everybody kind of making connections and expanding the knowledge of Hedera and all the cool stories that we hear from these different endeavors. But what is super cool that I see is when two people from the Hedera ecosystem get together in real life, and just like get a picture together or start sharing ideas. And the concept of a Hedera focused convention is really interesting to me, because now you're going to have all of these folks from within the Hedera ecosystem come together in real life over a span of, it looks like, a week. That's got to be really interesting, because that's when we're going to start to see all of these kinds of startups, community projects, NFT projects truly be able to collaborate in a whole new way, and potentially have people from other ecosystems come into our world a little bit. And this is the first one. It was bound to happen. It's happening October in Dallas, and I'm probably going to be there. A lot of people are going to be there. It's going to be really interesting. I think the website is, let me see what the website is. HederaCon. I don't know if they have the website up yet. Maybe they do. They're on Twitter at HederaCon. But Go check it out. Get plugged in. It's this October. It's a convention for Hedera. It's really, really exciting. Wow, that brings us to the end of the news. There are a couple things in the Twitter thread pinned to the top of the spaces that I didn't quite get to, but if you want to see everything, there are a couple things that we weren't able to chat on just because I really have to get on with my evening and get ready for my Monday. I know that Rob's already experiencing Monday, but I still have Monday coming. And I'm thinking about all this stuff, and, when I look at my key takeaways, and I look at the theme of the show, how soon is now, it definitely feels like it's not that my hands are coming off the wheel a little bit, but it's been so long. It's been years and years and years of watching all of these individual use cases and initiatives across the ecosystem in the same way that maybe I would sit down and watch grass grow. And when you sit and watch grass grow, you can't really tell that it's growing, right? But if you check out the grass, leave, come back, a month later, you're going to go, oh my God, this grass is out of control. And there's so many different things happening now. It's not possible to watch all of these use cases and initiatives so closely anymore. I'm pretty sure that I'm on these weekly spaces, I'm just covering a sliver of what's happening. And the how soon is now, I'm wondering what's happening to that, lawn that I haven't checked out in a while. Am I going to go and check it out and the grass is going to be up to my knees? I don't know. Because either I haven't thought of it, I haven't had time, I haven't been able to circle back, and that's what I'm feeling right now. Is and especially too with the Atma.io use case going live, I just have a sense that some of the things that I've been waiting to happen maybe have happened, and I just haven't had the capacity to come back and follow up with that and see what's going on. Much like, we were talking about Coupon Bureau, a huge focus of the community, but, even Rob was like, hey, you know what? I don't know what's going on with that. I have to go check it out. I think we're kind of all in the same boat. There's so much happening, and that's a good thing. But I definitely feel like, I've gone from being in the driver's seat and, kind of like looking all around and driving all around, and I'm in the passenger seat now. And, I think that this year is just going to be a big change. And we've been seeing some big changes, right? We saw, Lehman and Mance leave Swirlds. We saw the HBAR Foundation get created. I remember when they changed the name from Hashgraph to just Hedera. We've seen all these fundamental changes behind the scenes, and so many of these things have happened that now at this point, I think that it's just about scale, and it's just about just letting this stuff grow like the grass. And we're going to go back and check some things out and kind of go, whoa, what's been happening here? I had no idea that this all came to fruition. Because as the ecosystem grows and grows and grows, all of these things that were big to us are going to start to get smaller and smaller and smaller. So the question is, how soon is now? And sometimes that phrase makes no sense. Other times it reminds me of a great song by the Smiths. But that's what came to my mind, just thinking about and feeling about what's happening in the ecosystem now. So I think that is an attitude that I have right now. I remember when we were winding down the year last year, I talked about circling back to some of these projects I had an eye on to see what they were doing. But then step function and the revelations about, all the new governing council members in the pipeline, all these different types of things. There's so much happening. So if we stick together, and keep communicating, I think we're going to be able to keep up with this stuff. But fortunately or unfortunately, the show is going to continue to get longer. So be prepared for that. At least with the recording, you can listen to me on 150% speed. So that does help. But with that, another week behind us and another week ahead. A huge shout out to everyone listening live on Twitter Spaces right now, and an extra shout out to everyone listening to the recording on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, YouTube, or wherever you may find yourself. If you have a moment, give the show a rating and review on your favorite platform. It helps a lot. And another huge thank you to Rob Allen, Senior Vice President of Ecosystem Acceleration at the HBAR Foundation. Great conversation. I'm going to listen to this episode again for sure. And thanks for tuning in to Hashgraph News and Rumours, episode 69. How soon is now? Broadcast live on Twitter Spaces every Sunday at 7 p.m. Eastern, 4 p.m. Pacific, and made available on all major podcast platforms every Monday. Get all the info you need about the show and listen to past episodes at itsbrandond.com/HBAR. Make sure to join the Hashgraph enthusiast Twitter communities to share your insights, ask questions, and invite new friends. If you'd like to become a supporter of the show, feel free to send an HBAR donation to enthusiast.hbar using your Hedera wallet. And again, I appreciate everyone tuning in. I'll see you live on Twitter Spaces next Sunday, same time, same place. For everyone listening now, I'm going to keep the spaces open for a few more moments. If you see somebody listening that you don't recognize, give them a follow, check out their profile. Let's stick together. If you see someone you do recognize that you haven't connected with in a while, click their profile, send them a message. What's up? What's going on? What have they been working on? It must be something cool. They're still listening to these shows. And that's the whole purpose of these. Let's stay connected. So with that, have a great rest of your day or night or wherever you may be listening. And I'll see you next week. Hello, future. Goodbye, past.